Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's PJ's Thriving. It's all about growing, empowerment, learning, taking care of myself and my sidekick, which you might be able to hear in the background barking out the window. And I'm just going through different journeys. So if you'd like to support me on some of those journeys, please click the like, the subscribe, and the bell to follow every time I post a new video. If you have something that you think that I could watch and benefit from your videos and you would like support, put the comments down in the comments. Put a link, anything, or you know, just let me know and I can click on your name and go to your channel. I can watch your videos. Hopefully I can get some insight, some new tips, tricks, anything that could help me along my way, and I'll give you a thumbs up and subscribe to you and give you a little support and love too. In this video that I'm going to be sharing now, it's going to be a personal issue with me. It is on child abuse. And I'm going to be explaining the basic definitions of what child abuse is, the consequences that the children suffer because of the abuse, the signs that children give off that they're not intentionally giving, but it's a sign that should alert people that, hey, they're in trouble and something isn't right. And then I'm going to give a little scenario of my personal experience of the child abuse that I suffered towards the end of the video. And then I'm going to have a personal message to grandparents and aunts and uncles and family members. So no further ado, let's get started. This segment is going to be the definition on actual child abuse and neglect. So there's kind of a two-part section. Physical child abuse is the intentional use of physical force. Some examples of that are hitting, kicking, shaking, burning. Any other shows of force against a child is physical abuse. And neglect is the failure to meet a child's basic needs, which it could be physical or emotional. And those type of needs include basic things like housing, food, clothing, education, emotional needs, and medical care. Failing to keep the child from harm or potential harm or from threat of harm is neglect. There's no other way to say that. It is neglect. The consequences that children suffer, and I'm going to read a little bit of this off of a little segment that I have sitting over here, because the consequences are... It's a big deal when it comes to the children as they grow up. Children who are abused and neglected suffer immediate physical injuries, such as cuts, bruises, broken bones, even death. And even though there's also emotional and psychological problems, such as impaired social, emotional skills, and it also causes anxiety really bad in children. When the children that are abused and neglected and not helped, people turn a blind eye, they don't want to be involved, they don't want to be the bad person, and they just allow it to happen and things just continue. It has a tremendous impact on lifelong health and well-being if it's left untreated. It affects every part of their life as they grow up and become an adult. Exposure, especially if this abuse is left untreated, exposure to violence in childhood increases the risk of injury, future violence, victimization, perpetration, substance abuse, sexually transmitted diseases, just all kind of things that they can get into. It's delayed. It also causes delayed brain development, lower education attainments, and then they also end up having limited employment opportunities. Chronic abuse that's left untreated and children grow up with that, it results in toxic stress, and it can change brain development and increase the risk for problems like post-traumatic stress disorders and learning, attention, and memory difficulties. Child abuse, neglect are preventable 100%. It may happen, but if people stepped in to stop it, it's preventable. Everyone benefits from children that are kept safe, stable, and in a nurturing relationship and environment. So please, people, step in. The signs that children give off, that they're not even aware that they give off, there's unexplained injuries like bruises, bites, burns, broken bones, black eyes, just different things that they can't explain. They may seem scared, anxious, depressed, withdrawn, or aggressive, overly aggressive sometimes. They seem frightened from their parents. They may shrink at the approach of an adult or their parents or whomever they're afraid of. They just kind of cower down or shrink or flinch when they come or somebody comes at them too fast. Some children abuse animals and even their pets. And then there are some children that will tell. They'll come to you and they'll tell you. There are signs for neglect. Children have maybe too many unexplained absences from school or activities or things that they're supposed to be in. The child may beg or steal for food or basic things that they may need. They may lack medical care, vision and dental care, and those things are kind of obvious if they get injured and it's not being taken care of, or if they have medical issues that don't seem to be going away, or they're not taking medication or things for issues. And dental is a big one that you can visually see. You will see their teeth literally just rotting out of their mouth and they're not being taken care of. There's some children constantly dirty, or they have a very foul smell, and you know it's happening a lot and it's not changing. There could be lack of sufficient clothing for the weather type. It could be winter and they're still in summer clothes. It could be summer and they're still in winter clothes. Sometimes they'll be wearing winter clothes for several days at a time. They could be hiding or covering up bruises. Some children, even at young ages, will start to abuse alcohol and drugs. And then, of course, there's always some children who have no one at home. Either the parents are gone all the time or they just really don't care what they're doing. They may constantly say, well, I don't have anybody at home. There's nobody to take care of me. Nobody cooks me dinner. There's those type of things that are all signs of neglect. This issue is kind of sensitive, but it's on reporting. Reporting if you suspect a child is being abused. I have my baby sitting up here to my sidekick trying to get in my lap. The first step in helping a child is learning to recognize the signs of the maltreatment. One single sign doesn't necessarily mean that the child is being abused, but if there is a presence of the signs occurring repeatedly or in combination, and that it does warrant concern. If you suspect that a child is being harmed, reporting your suspicions may help protect that child. Any concerned person, family or not, can report suspicious of child abuse and neglect. Reporting your concerns is not making an accusation. It is a request for an investigation of an assessment to determine if there is help needed. Not reporting signs, or if you actually know that a child is being abused, not reporting it is neglect. You're neglecting that child. Not reporting your concerns and letting harm come to the children. You also have to remember that child is going to remember that for the rest of their life, that you did nothing to help them and you were an adult capable of helping in that situation. So especially grandparents, you guys got to remember, if you suspect it and you don't want your name put in it, then you can use a computer and type out a letter so that no one sees your handwriting. Don't give too many personal details so the family members don't figure out that it's you. and mail those letters in. Mail it to their school. Mail it to the Family Department of Social Services, whatever it is that they're called in your city or town or state. Mail it to the police department. You mail it to more than one place, it is not going to be ignored, and somebody is going to go do a welfare check and talk to those children and find out if there's anything going on. And doing it that way, they're not going to know that who it was that reported it. Now, if you know for a fact and you have proof that there is abuse, by all means report it. Call the police immediately. Don't let those kids suffer all their life because you are too afraid to say something. Now, just a little bit of my own personal issues, the things that happened to me as a child. In my medical records, I was 6 months old when I was first taken to the emergency room, and through x-rays and exam, they found out that I had a broken collarbone. In the statements that were wrote down, my mother had told them that I stood myself up in the crib and fell out. And nobody questioned that. I was 6 months old. I mean, I don't know, back then, they weren't required by law to have to report that, so that got swept under the carpet. And then looking at some of the pictures that my mom had in her stuff and in photo albums that ended up getting passed to my mom as grandparents and other people have passed away, there were pictures of me 10, 11 months old, and I had this great big old black shiner of an eye. And again, there was another picture, I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. I had a really big black eye. So the abuse, the physical part of the abuse started really young. My mother was very angry. She was very mean. She just was upset and hated the whole world. She was abused as a child, and instead of taking responsibility for herself as an adult, she never went through counseling, and she repeated history. She was a victim, and she couldn't figure out how to stop being a victim. So every situation that happened growing up to us, she was the victim in the situation. She turned it around. For what she did to us, she was the victim. It was our fault. So my mother was mentally capable of living a normal life and portraying to the outside world that everything was peachy keen. She always had to have the nicest yard. She was very creative. Had to have the best decorations, Christmas, birthdays, everything. To the outside world, it appeared that we had a good life. But the people that were around us, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, family, friends, they saw a whole lot more that nobody wanted to be involved in. Nobody wanted to start a family feud. And they didn't want to tangle with my mother because my mother was, she could be very nasty and mean. I grew up watching her beat the crap out of my dad. My dad was very submissive to her and did whatever she wanted and however she wanted it. So he didn't stand up for us either. Of course, he was slipping into our bed at night, and that she hated that. So she hated us for that too, because instead of protecting us and seeing us as being abused that way, she hated us for stealing our husband, for taking him away from her. But she never did anything out of the way growing up to stop it. She actually joined in instead of protecting us. There were many, many times when she would be nice and bribe us with candies and ice creams and different things, and then take us to the bed and do things. Her and my father both would do things to us, and they were teaching us. I keep saying us. I have a younger brother and an older sister. And in the beginning, it was one at a time. But then after that was all over, and we had ice cream or treats, whatever they bribed us with, which they never gave us any other time, but during that time, she was very hateful and mean and called us all kind of names. It was, you know, we were the whore, the trash. She really just hated us. I mean, she made sure that we knew we ruined her life, and we were a burden on her. She was very, very lazy, and from a very, very early age, she made us start cleaning and doing all the chores in the house. And then when my dad got home, she would take credit for it all. But on the other hand, she would take pictures of us. And this started when we were 3 and 4, of her having us scrub walls and scrub floors. And if we didn't do it right, we got hit or kicked or thrown down, shoved over, you know, however she felt that she could do at that moment. If she wanted us to admit something of her choice, she would want us to say things or do things. She would make us sit in the middle of the floor, and she would have those big, thick dictionaries and encyclopedias, and we would have to sit with our arms straight out and our hands holding the books like this, and we would be up on our knees. So as soon as our arms would start dropping down, we would get hit in the head, the neck, the shoulders with this yardstick ruler that she had. And that's how she would persuade us to say or do or act the way she wanted us to. And sometimes she just would sit there and laugh at us, you know, call us weak. We couldn't do it. We couldn't hang. We were useless. This was continuous. She fed off of our physical pain. And to us, we didn't know any other way growing up until we started getting older and started understanding. And you know, there was a few times that our family was investigated, and of course she really beat the crap out of us and made sure that when we had to talk to somebody that we would deny it. Or if I made a complaint at school once and I told them the truth, I thought they were going to take me right then, but instead they laughed and sent me home. By the time I got home, they had already been there to talk to my mom, so it was not good, and I knew from that point on that I could never do that again. I couldn't go to school for a few days. I mean, that's how bad that she really just beat me up. I would say by the time I was 8, she started getting worse. It wasn't just a smack or a hit. She used to keep a leather 2-inch thick belt, and she would on the back of the couch, and that's where she stayed, on the couch all the time. She would grab that belt at any time and just start swinging it. By the time I was 8, it started getting worse. It became smacking and hitting and shoving. It became to actual like fist hitting, and she would hit us in the arms, a lot in the stomach, because it wouldn't show. Our clothes always covered it, so she was very careful. Once I turned her in, I threatened to turn her in once, and it got even worse. She would literally kick us in the stomach and laugh, and to see how far she would make us slide down the hallway when she would do that to us. So it was a back and forth with the physical thing. Either she was angry or she was just wanting to see the physical pain that she could cause us. I remember her stepping on my toes once when we were in the kitchen, and because I didn't make any noise, she kept doing it over and over and over until she broke my foot. And I was not allowed to say anything, wasn't allowed to tell anybody. I had to say that I jumped off of a bed and onto a Rubik's Cube, and that's how my bones got broke. And it was actually her big butt stomping on my foot. Because as I got older, I became more rebellious, and I refused to give in to her. So she wanted me to cry out in pain, and I wouldn't. And I was in pain too. But, you know, of course, when my foot felt like it just crushed in, of course I cried out in pain, and the next morning I couldn't even put my shoe on. So, yeah, that was a mistake on my part too. I was constantly nervous coming home from school, or, you know, knowing that she was coming home or when she had to get up, because I never knew what kind of mood she was in. Didn't know what was going to happen the next day. So I had very bad nervous stomach issues, because it was fear. She ruled by fear, and it was fear of getting hit and in trouble again. That was a constant thing. And my mom would be sitting on the couch, and she would say, "Get me that get me my Coke, and it was right on the coffee table right in front of her, but she didn't want to have to bend to get it, so she would call us to come and get it, and then we would get hit or smacked because we didn't come fast enough, or we didn't set it down the right way or face the right way. I mean, it was just those kind of things. It was just continuous. And I would say sometimes it would be, she'd be up staying late watching TV, and she would go get something out of the kitchen to eat, and if she found one dirty dish, God forbid, she would come and get us up, all of us. She would make us pull everything out of the cupboard and rewash every dish. That was her way of teaching us a lesson because we weren't doing the dishes correct. She never washed a dish. She had nothing to do with housework. We had to do it all. Every single day we had chores, and on the weekends we had tons of chores. And we had to do our chores first before we got to our homework because the chores getting done were more important to her to live in a clean house. So it wasn't like we were her children. We were her little puppets and slaves, and that's how we felt. My grandparents knew, because my mom was very nasty and would just flip off the slightest little thing. And I had 3 sets of grandparents. One of them divorced and remarried, so there was 3 sets that were in and out, depending on where we were living in our lives, because we moved every 2 to 3 years because my dad was in the military. So it was harder for the Department of Social Services and Protective Family Services to keep track of us and keep things in check because, we moved all the time. My grandparents knew, and they would apologize for her. I'm so sorry, but, they never told anybody because they said that she would know. Because she didn't have a lot of friends. There wasn't a whole lot of people that came in and out of her house. So they said that she would know, and they didn't want to be the bad person in our family, or they would give us this line, well, we don't want to lose seeing you. There was no love in our family. None. It wasn't until we got older that, and got out of there that, we started knowing what love was. I would say no one that the family members that we had, there was nobody that liked my mother. They didn't like her. Her own family didn't, and my dad's family really hated her to the point that they didn't want to come around. The first few years, they would send us all gifts. I remember growing up getting gifts and stuff, and my mother would accept the gifts, and then, through conversations, the grandparents would say, oh, did you get this? Or did you have fun with this? And did you get to keep this? And when we started telling them, no, we didn't get to keep it, they stopped sending it. So they kind of like backed out of our lives because of my mother. So it was a lot of bickering between the family members. I remember my mom always being in some kind of fight with somebody. And it was he said, she said. That's what it seemed like it was to us, but she couldn't get along with people. She didn't know how to get along with more than one person at a time. And that showed true with my siblings and myself. If she was mad with one, she might get along with me. If she was mad with me, she would get along with the other one. And there was no rhyme or reason to how she was. One minute she would be happy, one minute she would be mad, and we were getting in trouble for it. I remember putting dishes away, and because the silverware was rattling in my hands, she would take me by the back of my head and just smack my head right up against the cupboard. And she would put a paring knife, if she was in the kitchen, or whatever knife and she would put it right up to my knife and tell me that, she's sick of me not listening and I'm making too much noise. She had to have things very quiet. She brought me in this world. She would take me out because I wouldn't follow her rules. So, it was like that a lot. I do remember my sister and my dad holding my mom back when she came after me with a butcher knife and had me all jacked up into my closet, and I didn't even know what for. And she started screaming, saying that I was trying to ruin her marriage and that I was a little whore and I was trying to steal her husband away from her. Now, when we got home from school, she was in a good mood. We did our chores, didn't get in trouble. She was fine. And then when my dad got home, them two started fighting about something, and she just went off, and I got brought into it. And then I remember my sister and my dad crying and literally pulling on her, trying to get her off of me. And I had no clue what was going on until she started screaming at me. And I'm like, I didn't understand where it was coming from, but I wasn't allowed to say anything, because if I did, she would have damn decked me, and I would have been out. Her words would have been, I was accusing her of lying. Heard that a few times. And, you know, that's the physical side of it. It was like that until we left the house and weren't there anymore. The neglect came in from both of my parents. They didn't keep us safe from harm. They caused a lot of harm. And even though my dad didn't physically harm us like that, he didn't protect me from it. Neither one of them cared about my emotional needs, or what they were doing to us, or what the effects were. That was not an option. I got told that I was in Fantasyland and that I was full of drama, and I got accused of being a liar all the time. So, you know, they both failed at keeping me from harm and from threats and just from all around harm, from everything. My father cried to us all the time because he was afraid of my mother. And he used to apologize for how she treated us. And, I mean, would cry even. We would see tears. But my dad, I watched him our whole life getting beat up and bullied by her too. And he never stood up to her. He didn't stop her, didn't even try. I mean, he did that one time, and that was with a knife. But, you know, that came down to, you know, if she used a knife on me, that the police would be involved. And they didn't want the police involved. I mean, that's what he was hollering at my mom about. Not about what she was doing, or... it was the whole scenario was wrong. He used to climb into our beds, and he treated me like I was his girlfriend, and would cry to me about how bad she treated him all the time. Talked to us like we were girlfriends instead of his children. So I felt sorry for him. So he was the really nice parent who made us feel sorry for him, and would have gossip parties with us where we were just bashing my mom and how bad we hated her, and, you know, teasing her and making fun of her, how she, you know, or some of her faces were when she was mad and angry. And I mean, it was just not a good scenario. So there was neglect on both sides, from both parents and from everyone that was around us. All right, this is my personal message that I would like to give to grandparents, aunts, uncles, any other family member, cousins, friends, neighbors, anybody that will listen. If you see or you suspect that a child is being abused, or if it's in your family and you are a family member and you know that something isn't right and there is abuse, whether it's emotional abuse or physical abuse, any type of abuse, you need to say something. And I don't mean say something to the family, because that's not going to give them any help. That will cause family problems. But if you love that family member that's being abused, you are the person to help protect that child. And it may be that social services will come in and investigate the family, and, you know, they may discover that there are big problems or just little problems, but, you know, first we'll keep the children safe, and then second can get the family on the right track, get them into counseling. Social services' main objective is trying to repair the family and keep the family together. If the child is in harm, the child will be taken out. They will try to find other family members that can take the kids while the parents go through classes and different things, or jail, or whatever it is that they have to go to. while they're going through that. The ultimate goal is to repair the family and put the family back together. So it is in your best interest, if you love that child, you need to report it, because you can report it anonymously. It doesn't have to be your name. Don't give too many personal tips so they don't know where it came from. It doesn't even have to be your voice or your handwriting. Type out a letter and send it in. Because I'm going to tell you that I am now an adult, but for my grandparents and other family members and people that were around, they all failed me. They did nothing to help me, and they knew how bad it was. There were times that I was black and blue and purple from my neck all the way to the back of my legs. There was no skin showing, and they saw that. They knew what was happening. They saw the verbal and the mental and the emotional abuse that we suffered from my mother, but they did nothing, absolutely nothing to help us. In my eyes and in the law's eyes, they are just as guilty. They neglected our welfare, our well-being, and they just neglected us because they were more concerned about themselves and not being in a fight with somebody than keeping a child safe. So my message to you is love that child the best that you can. And if that means that you have to turn that family member in, do it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will go to jail unless it's something very serious. If it's something lighter, still they won't go to jail. They'll have to go to counseling. They'll get the emotional help that they need. And that is the best thing that you can do for that child. This is April, and it is Child Abuse Awareness Month. And this is why I am bringing my stories forward, so family members, neighbors, other people will know. Please make other people aware. Love those children. Don't ignore them. Don't push them aside, because all that's doing is allowing them to grow up in harm and them having a very dysfunctional life as an adult. So please do your part. Protect those children. Bye for now. Stay safe.